Hi, I'm Heinbach. It's good to have you back. Welcome to the April 2020 Patreon Q&A, where everyone on my Patreon asks me questions and I answer them as best as I can. If you want to get a question in, just subscribe to any tier on my Patreon and then ask away. There's a monthly thread, sticky always. And without further ado, let's get to it. Simon Vargas. Hey Hein, I'm interested in knowing about the reason you use so many different cassette decks for different things. I know you've gone into this before, but the tape videos only talk about the Marantz PMD. But I constantly see you pulling out the Fostex X28, the Tascam, etc. I'd love to know why each goes where you have them. In my studio, I have all these different spaces where you do different things. For example, the Fostex X28 is set up in the tabletop over there, which is just a flight case, and where I experiment with new gear that I got, because I can easily film from up top, and it's nice to try out something before I integrate it with everything. So the Fostex there is basically mostly a mixer with the added option of using it for tape loops and using it as a musical instrument. I don't enjoy it in that form as much because it's just not as hands-on as the Tascam 424 Mark I, which is right over there with the test equipment. That mixes all the test equipment and also enables me to loop it. And basically a fast way to multiply the test equipment. That was especially important when I didn't have that many options, but it's also a nice way to lend a different tone to the test equipment. Sometimes recording the same note and then pitching it down and then playing both together creates a nice contrast. One is clear and powerful, the other a little less so. And so there's something time travel-y about that operation. So basically that's why I use these machines where they are. It's mostly for mixing, but also tape looping. Francis Lafortune. I often see a Walkman being used in your videos. I know that they are used to get a warmer tape flavor, but how do you get it to record and play through? That's because those are not Walkman, those are dictaphones. And you can record into them mostly, the best way is through the microphone. It's also nice to have some air moving always, especially when you slow stuff down, because I feel that pitching down a room is even much better than pitching down the direct recording. And also because the line-in on these, they don't have line-ins usually. They've got mic-ins and those compress like very strongly. It can be hard to get a clean line signal out of them. But those are dictaphones, and I made a buyer's guide video that I'll link here. Fanopoaya, hey buddy, you again. What are the difference between passive and active filters? The difference is active filters have their own power, so they run circuitry that runs under power. Passive filters don't have that. They are all passive, no power runs through them, and they use, for example, coils to get the attenuation that you want. In the sound, the passive filters sound just a tad richer. I don't know, maybe it's also because of all the gain you need to like put in there and then get it back, so there's always some kind of good gain staging going on and maybe a little bit of overdrive there. But passive filters, they've got their own truffly kind of tone to them. Fanapoya, on the distortion video, you showcased the Eowave Swarm. Have you thought about making a video dedicated to the device? Maybe a beginner's guide or something along those lines? I'm not terribly good at beginner's guides. I made one for tape and I made one for the Coco Quantus. These take a long time, but I'll definitely make a video on the Quantum Swarm, and that's in fact the reason why I got it. It was sent to me by Eowave to make a video in exchange for their beautiful amplifier, the Resonator, which is something that was used with the Ondas Martineau originally, and they had a small run of, I think, in the 10 years ago, and they're just gonna build one for me in exchange for making that video, and I'm super excited for that, and I can't wait to play it through that. And the Quantity Swarm is just a lovely, lovely little synthesizer, and in June I plan to release the video. Simon Vargas, hello again. Woke up today with a couple different questions. Number one, what do you think about the Vermona Eurorack modules? Have you tried them? No, but they look nice and big. 2, are there any other Brüel & Kjær sound level meters you recommend? I've seen some a bit more modern on eBay and would like to know what I'm up against. I don't think so. I think they eliminated like the audio out and stuff on all the later ones. So 2203, 2204 is good. I think maybe the 2209, but I would have to check on that again. So stay with the old stuff. Gangtang. Hi, thanks for your work. You have been a big inspiration. Thank you. Do you have any tips on dealing with tiredness and lack of energy while making music? I have a full-time job and 2 small kids, and as a result, I don't have so much time moments for music. I do manage to get an hour or so a couple of times a week, often at night, where most of the time I'm too mentally tired to actually sit down at my instrument and make something, even though I want to, which is very frustrating. Thanks. I kind of touched upon that in my video on inspiration that I'll just link again. You basically have to provide yourself the means to record anytime easily. So you have to have everything figured out so you can just hit record and set everything up. It makes such a difference. That's really important, so there's no extra barrier for you. But with kids and a full-time job, I wouldn't know how to find time if this wasn't my job, basically. Because now homeschooling and 2 kids, young, and if this wasn't, it's super hard. So don't beat yourself too much up about that, because it is a difficult situation you're in. See the music making process as something relaxing. I think many people that I know that are into electronic music, they've switched up even to modular, because that's something, music with a modular you can just build up like a sculpture, and it doesn't have to be finished like track by track by track. And it's very relaxing to just patch and explore. And you're not worried so much about results, I feel, because you can just feel the music flowing and discover all these new things. So that could be a thing where you're just thinking about, like, don't force yourself to results, just play and experiment in an open environment. So create a musical environment for yourself that's constantly inspiring and just fun. And it's just as easy for you to go there and get back to and have the modular bleeping away, for example, as possible. If you're thinking about like finishing like tick, 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 tick tracks and stuff like that, it gets a whole lot of work. But I remember when my kids were really young, they were just born, I would keep the module on for 3 or 4 days and just build and build and build and then hit record. And every time I could go there in between, when they were napping or just in the morning when I woke up and had my coffee and just, it was a crazy cup, by the way. So I could just doodle away for 50 minutes and keep on building and think about it and keep on going back to it. So it always felt like there was something living and breathing. So did I just tell you to go modular? If you are already, I don't know, but that is something that helped me when time was really an issue. But just try to find an environment that works for you, where you put something in and you get a lot out of that, so the music plays back to you. Coco Quantus, for example. Coco Quantus, I feel like many of the questions should be answered that I gave here, like for inspiration, should just be get a Coco Quantus. It's a shortcut to inspiration and not feeling as tired with instruments. Liam Freiwald, you always seem to find such nice chords and harmonies to work with in your music. How do you go about figuring out the harmonic framework for a piece? Do you lean more into chords you know, or are you experimenting to figure out where the piece will end up going first? With electronic music, and especially how I approach it now, I often listen to what's in the sound. I try to discover the melodies by listening to the music that I patched. And again, this is due to modular, where I just started patching away, build something, and then I would hear all these harmonies and melodies. They would just appear. And after I heard like the root note and the dominant and the subdominant, I would then develop further onwards. And in regards to chord thinking, I just try to make what fits in there. Sometimes I employ modal scales, meaning they're not like fixed scales. I can just play whatever I want. That's a kind of tongue-in-cheek. I listen to the sound. I try to find the harmonies and notes that belong in there. And then I think about where I want the piece to develop, and therefore I employ harmonies by going to dominant chords, subdominants, and all the ways in between. But I don't do the starting from chord thing that I did more when I was writing songs and music with guitarists and stuff like that. Captain Null. Any tips and tricks for a fellow Bugbrand user? How do you use the compression musically? There's sidechaining, parallel compressing. What's your take on it? Oh, I basically have it set up to almost always the same setting. Like at noon is the attack, so the bass drum can go through. Release is really like all the way to the left. And I then just take 1 to 3 or 4 decibels off on the whole master bus and adjust the threshold. And that's all, basically. I don't do much else. It sits on my master bus on the mixer, and that's just a really nice way to add a bit of glue. And I sometimes adjust the filter to tune to the bass drum. So yeah, basically the idea is let the bass drum through and then so it gets just a bit of pumping. Tech Junior. I recently employed your sound-on-sound recording technique on my Marantz the other day, and then took the cassette and played it back through my Tascam. Much to my surprise, at each of the sound layers and recorded were separate into 4 tracks. I recorded everything directly on the Marantz. Just curious how something like this might occur, or if you've run into this incident. Each of the layer was separated onto each track, so normally I would think you would hear like everything you recorded on each of the 4 tracks, because the Marantz is a mono full track recorder, if it's the 2-to-1 or 2-to-2 we're talking about, so it will record all over. And so you would hear it on all the tracks. But are you saying that each layer that you recorded was then split onto another layer? I wouldn't know how that is physically possible. But yeah, the Marantz is full track, so it would record what you record on all 4 tracks, because the track division is not on the tape, it's in the heads, because the heads read the tape and the heads divide which part of the tape they will use. Tech Junior. Also, I would love to see a video about using a sync track on a 4-track cassette recorder with some of your synthesizer equipment. I've seen them on Tascam Yamaha models. I noticed some Dolby noise reduction systems have a feature to not erase these tracks. Do you ever use them with synths? If so, what's the process from recording the sync tempo track and then syncing your synths? Have you done this with cassette loops? Seems like it might help to make loops that are more metered, but I wanted to get your take on the process and what interesting sonic possibilities it might offer. Thanks, Heimbach. There's a video planned on that. I got like an episode called Syncing it's hard to say, Syncing the Unsyncable. And that's about one of the tracks on the album where I quasi-sync tape loops and test equipment, all these things that you see here. And it works out fine for that track. But and then I wanted to do the same thing where I tried to sync a tape loop by recording a click track. And that's absolutely possible. And especially if you've got a modular, you can shape the click track after and use it to trigger anything. And it's an old and time-honored tradition. On tape loops, the difficult thing is you would need to cut the tape loop perfectly. And you can't measure everything perfectly. And with cassette loops, that's super hard. You can do it nicely with reel-to-reel loops. And I was thinking of trying that with my Uher, because that... Oh no, I can't. No, because the problem is I don't have a stereo machine. I don't have a stereo machine except for my big master machine. So I can't show it really with my Nagras, because there's no separation. These are mono machines. But I'll figure something out to show and demo this technique. It is absolutely possible, but the sync will never be perfect. So, because at the splice point, it might just glitch, and also, yeah, the timing. How are you gonna get a super exact tape loop, especially on a cassette? I don't think that's really possible. But it might be nice to sync events. Like you have... you have events. So you say, now this note comes in, and then I want a clock to appear, and then I want this to trigger a thing on the modular, and all things like that. But video coming. I'm the Kobold. Hello again, Mr. Heimbach. Thank you for the advice you gave me in the last Q&A and for the help you and everyone else has been giving me in this subreddit. I'll be sure to link the aforementioned album when it's finally done. Anyway, another long-winded question for you. I see myself more as a sound designer than a musician, often being more interested in the sounds I could create if I did this or that than creating any actual music with them, if that makes any sense. That's not to say I'm not a musician. I have a deep musical background. I'm just more interested in creating sounds themselves, rather than any cohesive piece at the moment. Doing sound design for films and games or theater or whatever else seems like it would be my dream job. So my advice is, my question is, do you have any advice for people hoping to get into these industries? I know the cliche response to this is, you won't break into the industry if you don't do the networking. But I was wondering what your particular take on this question would be. Also, when I've talked with people in the industry, they have all said I should ditch working with tape as it's too slow. Do you have any thoughts on this? There's so many different industries, industries or like fields of work, and I find you can only work effectively to network in one. I did that with theater by going to theater plays, meeting up, and basically networking, meaning drinking with other theater people and directors, and then working with them, especially students. That's the easiest way. You can go to a film school and say, hey, here I'm doing film music, you want to try, and just work with the young and aspiring directors, and maybe 10 years later this will pay off. It's a long game, basically, you're playing, but it's also exciting because you get to know someone's process from the start, and you're part of the whole team and development, and you grow yourself as an artist. So I really, really think that is a cool way to do that, and just focus on the thing that you want to do. And in regards to skipping tape, people have no idea. People have no idea. It's use whatever tools you like and use them in the way that they're strong. For example, my music now, because I've gotten some publicity to what I'm doing, and now I'm breaking into industries that I didn't apply for. Through my channel, I'm getting contacts to gaming studios that want to work with me. I'm getting contact to sync and distribution companies, and that's because I've gotten known for my sound. And for example, when I talked with the one sync company, the guy I was talking to was expecting that there would be changes requested or adjustments to the tracks, but no, the CEO said, no, this is perfect, let's just release it. And that's exactly the thing that I'm discovering myself. Once I record something onto a tape with the whole process, and it's just there's nothing else, there's no multi-track or anything, this is the thing that will get taken, and people will react to that, because it sounds like a finished record. And it doesn't sound like, yeah, you can still tweak something. You say, this is done, and that's a strong move, and then it works. If it's a good piece, of course, and that takes a long time. And I think I botched a lot of pieces along the way by using that technique, but there's always a new piece to be made, and errors can be somewhat corrected, like with multiband compression or isotope tools or in mastering. But still, I'm getting jobs exactly because of the whole cumbersome, for some people think that's cumbersome, for me it's just easier, technique that I'm using. So yeah, I get the job especially due to my sound. That's another way to break into. Develop a sound and an aesthetic that people think, oh, that's interesting. So basically, be a successful artist, or quasi-successful and modestly successful as I am, and then work will come. So that's probably not very helpful, but these are the two ways that I've found work for me. Either networking, grassroots work, or becoming known for a sound and a thing that you do, and then people want only that sound and nothing else, and you will be doing them a disservice by not using the methods that you traditionally use, because they expect those. Luke Palmer. Hey Heinbach, new to Patreon and joined to support what you do. Thank you. I'm interested to know if you do Heimbach full-time now. I do. And what the transition was like away from a day job. My transition period looked like this. Directly after university, I started to work in a small store that sold professional audio equipment. And I did mostly writing the blog, marketing, I did some sales, I did a bunch of stuff there. I did some distribution, and at the same time, I was already starting to work in the theater, because all the contacts that I built up during my university time by joining the theater group there and getting all the contacts to all these different directors had me found already work. So I was starting to travel across Germany and Switzerland and Austria with that. So I only worked 3 days a week there, which was fine because I was alone. I didn't need much money. I lived like in a 12 square meter room with, and then there were 3 flatmates. It was right in St. Pauli. So it was just basically all I needed. I could get by with what I had then and with what I earned. That went on for 2 years, I think, 2 years, 2.5 or 3 years, where I switched like that before I said, no, I can only do theater work, but I still did some remote work for the shop. I wrote the blog, so I earned a little bit of steady money. Basically, I earned like the rent for that small place. And that's until I completely switched over to that, I think like in 2009, where I didn't do anything else but music. And yeah, so I'd started this really early on, connecting with people and networking. So the transition period was pretty easy, and I only ever worked like part-time in companies because during student time that was all I had. And I worked for a lot of different like companies, especially during the first .com bubble, but that's a different story. Suzanne Atkinson. Hi Heimbach, I joined just to support you. Thank you. My question is of a beginner nature. You obviously have a lot of experience and are very skilled when you sit down to your experiments, the one we see on your videos at least. Do you feel that you can immediately make music? They all flow so nicely, have such balanced sounds and are very interesting. I'm always mesmerized by the sound and soundscapes you create, but when I try to do something similar, it just feels noisy and get bored quickly. Any tips for moving forward and enjoying the sounds I make, keeping the inspiration more fresh? I think I touched upon a few of these points on the video on inspiration. But when you're talking about how to create interesting sounds that are not noisy and bring you more interested, you should just try out new techniques. Read about patch design from people like Alan Strange, or the old manuals for the synthesizers, such as the System 100M manual that you can easily find online. There's a lot of good ideas there that help you get better at patching and making your sounds yourself interesting. And once you've mastered those, it will be much more easier for you to create sounds that interest you personally. I think that would be a good way to go about that problem, that the sounds are not interesting or too noisy. Fanopoaya, you should join up thrice now for the Patreon for all these questions. Tangentially piggybacking off I'm the Kobold's questions, I've always wondered how you created the sounds at 0:55, lots of timestamps now, in your composing music for theater video. Would you be willing to tell us how you made these sounds if you remember? I can have a look. Classical, like a Greek play. I tend to make music that's more vast and deep and simple, because the language itself has a lot of power. Ah yeah, first sound at 052 in that video is a Fender Rhodes pitch down on a Nagra 3. And it's very absolute. If it's a modern play, I tend to use more tiny, fragmented instruments. If it's something in between, it depends. I might add period. 101, that's a Fender Stratocaster played into the Seared Lombardo Coco Quantos. You want to enhance even that, and you don't need words, you just need the image and the music and everything to work together to create one giant thing. Again, Seared Lombardo Coco Quantos, this time into 9-Aber Slate, all pitched down low. Another place it can be a Zeppelin coming on, and just if you have the giant drone coming up from the loudspeakers in the back, moving over the audience, and the actors look above, you can just see that also. You feel the giant thing, you don't have to show it. Seared Lombardo Coco Quantos. Okay, 3 times Seared Lombardo Coco Quantos. Those are the orange outs that basically read the time code. And I doubled these, I think, with some other plugins, but those I don't remember. Trinks Swan. Hello Heinbach, can you imagine making a video showing how to create a track from scratch, how to choose the sound sources, how to patch, which effects are suitable, and how you can ultimately compile and record the track? I know that takes a lot of time, but we can benefit a lot from it. It's in my making an album series. I completely did that whole process. And of course, I also did it in my making a theater score with a modular. And yeah, so that would be two things that pop immediately to mind, where I show the whole process. Troy Alden. Hi Heinbach, sorry if you've covered this in another one of your videos. Did you go to school for music or musical composition? I'm coming from the DIY punk rock world. I never got any formal training in music, and the "this is 3 chords now" for my band ethos served me well up to this point. I am, however, feeling a bit stuck behind my ignorance. Any thoughts on online education for music theory or courses or books? Thanks for all you're doing, please keep it up. I didn't go to music school. I studied musicology, but I had a bunch of stuff like that. The teach at music school there too, but more from an analysis standpoint. But I learned how to compose like in counterpoint and these things. And that just helps a lot, because for me, this is like, oh, I can take this technique from this composer. I can take this, and it's endless inspiration. It's like, chick. Okay, ideas, ideas, ideas. You hear about Wagner and the 16 hammers that you built, and then I wondered, oh, how can I make this into a snare drum? And I made a track with a metallic snare. I made a track with a metallic snare drum. That is, yeah, that was a good time for inspiration again, learning all these about, yeah, composition. But I think the best thing you can do is go to the basics, like the circle of fifths. Do that religiously and learn it by heart, and then play scales. Actually play different scales, try out all the scales, play those. And that's something I did when I was 15 and started out, and had played music for 10 years already, or 9 years, but had no idea about the theory. And then just going through scales, doing that work, and for a year, that helped me tremendously. That's like something I could benefit so well years and years and years after. There's one channel that you should like. I don't know if that's your cup of tea, but 8-Bit Music Theory. He covers a lot of complex music theory in game sounds, and you can apply that to anything else. That's like my favorite music theory channel. 8-Bit Music. Awesome, awesome, awesome work. Fano Mopoaya. Last question for this month. We'll see. If you had to keep one, which would you choose? Jolie Effects, Stretch, Reverb, Chase Bliss, Audio, Blooper. Does it make sense for a home studio of both? Is it dumb to compare the two? Dumb? I don't know. It's just completely two different things, and I use them differently. Both are inspiration givers, and I would say both measure up very well together. And I couldn't say, like, I couldn't decide right now to keep only one or the other. If you're looking for something that does off-kilter, beautiful, different looping, Blooper is lovely. If you're looking for something even more creative that enables you to get basic call and response principles in your music, the Stretch Reverb is absolutely awesome. It makes two instruments play together. For Forfadrene, do you have any thoughts about tuning, equal temperament, just temperament, Hermod tuning, or solfeggio scales? As you use the non-conventional instruments, it may be easier to use absolute frequency and ratios of them rather than on conventional instruments. Oh yes, 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 yes. I tune, like, of course my piano is tuned normally, and with all the other instruments I tune by ear, and that's often more of a perfect pitch, how do you say it, a just tuning thing that I do there. But I haven't really experimented with scales in that regard, or with tuning scales, since university, where we had courses and the professor would show us the different effects of tunings, and it would become a completely different piece. But since I don't employ MIDI, where it's easy to use that with a Scala or something, I haven't really, obviously, or how do you say, I haven't really like intentionally tried to copy different tunings. But as soon as there's Scala file import, I remember that on Alto, and then there was La Monte Young. Oh, okay, La Monte Young. Okay, I have to try that tuning on this disco bass line. It was fun. And is a beautiful world to explore that. And also we will have Scala import on the new VST that Sonic Lab and me are developing, and I'm looking forward to experiment with that. But for me, everything has become tuning by ear else in the analog world. And so I don't even know what my ear tunes to exactly. I just have a feeling there is something a little bit off to regular tuning, but it's fun. So yeah, that's how I do it right now. So tuning has become a very personal thing that I do every time anew. And sometimes I don't even know what key I'm starting out with something. Ken Sheshtok, have you tried any of the Yes Cool F Mobenthy modules from Peter Blesser? If so, do you remember any particular or just get them all? I've been itching to dive in, but it might be better to just save up and buy some seared Lombard gear instead. I haven't. I had like 5 minutes at patch point with them and it was hell of confusing. And that's the first reaction with most seared Lombard instruments. But since I'm not that into Euro, except for certain things, and I never was that interested, I might just borrow a system and see what it does for curiosity reasons. But I've got a lot of Blooper in my life, but not the Euro modules. MGFM. One thing I'm often battling with is when I get a good thing going with multiple parts. I often want to progress it, but have no idea what to do. I find it's difficult to then go ahead and add B sections once I have a loop going. I often use Polymeter to stop tracks sounding too repetitive and just live arrange it a bit to bring stuff in and out. Generally that's okay, but my tracks are extremely simplistic as a result. Do you have any thoughts on how to add more of a narrative to composition? My music feels like snapshots of an idea of a piece where yours involves and communicates in interesting ways. Yeah, that's a nice topic. I think like narration in music narration in general is something I'm such a fan of. And I want to do a video where I talk about that concept more and how it relates to theory. I think you can get some ideas in the making of an album, a series, a playlist that should maybe give you some pointers how I approach the whole thing. But I want to talk about, narratology in music. And that's another big video planned for like June or July. We'll see. Anders Weinitz. Hello, Mr. Heinbach. I just recently discovered your excellent and inspiring channel on YouTube. I would love to if you could share some thoughts on the use of harmony and tonality in your genre of music, functional or modal or whatever. Thanks for putting in so much time and effort in sharing with us. Everybody wants to know about harmony right now. And I feel both flattered because as I said before, I mostly now listen and employ stuff that I've learned like decades ago. And I touch upon that again in the making of an album video. I would have to analyze and question myself how I actually do it, which is kind of a hard process. Because much of music making has become so intuitive to me right now that I feel more like when I'm talking about harmony, I'm thinking oftentimes I want this to be more Debussy. And then all that what I learned about Debussy floats in. And or I want that to be more like Bach, and then that flows in. And all is like these clusters of ideas and worlds instead of more, stuff that Adam Neely is so perfectly fine at denotating how that chord is and what the name is. Because oftentimes in my music, I've given up on the illusion of giving chord names because it can become too complex. Naming chords and naming music theory sometimes is just a convention that for me was a very textual thinker and concept thinker, like these clouds of ideas from which I grab stuff don't fit because I don't think like that. I think, as I said, I think Debussy, I think Bach, I think blues, I think jazz, I think noise, and then that comes in. So I kind of have to self-analyze to see what's in there, actually, which could be interesting. I don't know if I'm yet ready to do that, though, I have to say. It feels a bit weird to analyze myself in that regard. Yeah. Michael Southard. Aside from toy pianos, have you ever tried using children's toys in your music? I figured since you have kids, you might have experimented a bit. There seems to be a lot of lo-fi sounds coming out of those battery-powered VTech noisemakers, or even something like a baby monitor. I, of course, have done baby monitor feedback. It's lovely and it's a nice break when you've got nothing else to do but watch your toddler. I've got a bunch of kids' instruments like circuit band keyboards, circuit band drums. I've got automatones, big and small, and I use these a lot in the theater because those are easy instruments to get someone to make music in a funny way. There's no expectation to them that you have to perform. So there's no stress and the actor can concentrate on what he wants to show and just has this little tool to help him along. So I've got a lot of kids' instruments here, and like from the fart piano that came with the Mickey Mouse book. And what's else up there? Of course, the ton of toy pianos, modified drums, yeah. So I've been using a bunch of these, but not the newer stuff. The newer stuff usually there's not easily like circuit band, and that's where the cool sound comes from. Like the Bontempi System 5, which I already made a video about, that's a kid's keyboard, but it could be modded to be this awesome idea machine. Yeah, so I've stopped a bit looking for these toy instruments, the newer ones, simply because there's always just the same sound chip, and maybe you can pitch it down or up, but there's not so much more interesting stuff in there, I feel, in the new stuff. That are all the questions for this month's Q&A. If you want to get a question, just subscribe to any tier on the Patreon and ask away. There's a thread sticky every month. And I want to say thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. You are the reason I can keep on doing this, and you are the reason I'm making more and more videos. I've been a bit quiet this week because I'm still recuperating from the last marathon session of streams, but I'm working on new videos. There will be more about the album. I've got at least 2 or 3 more episodes planned, but release will be coming soon. It's actually happening. And there's some reviews to new gear that's coming out, such as the one hiding behind this. And yeah, I want to do a video on the analog computer, but that needs a bunch of time for me to get into. I've got a beautiful analog modular system that I want to explore in conjunction with that. And of course, all the theory videos and just some... the ideas are limitless, and it's all picking up next week again. That's it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.